Hello and welcome to First Dates and Soulmates, where we believe that there is nothing that cannot be accomplished with a color-coded spreadsheet and a to-do list. I am your co-host, Meg Casebolt.
And I'm Nikki Meg.
And this week we're going to be talking about Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Nikki, tell me, this was my idea to bring this in, so tell me what you thought about this book.
I am so happy you recommended this book because you've brought up Talia Hibbert a couple times in like either things we've been shipping or other recommendations. But truth be told, I haven't read any of her books. I don't really read straight romance. So I read this. I knew nothing about it other than the fact, when we're talking about our themes for January and we're like, hey, self-improvement, goal setting, like that's kind of an interesting narrative point or conflict for characters. Like, what do we know? And I knew one that was about a character trying to lose weight. And we're like, that might be interesting. And then you brought up this book. I knew nothing about it. I barely even read the book blurb when I went into this because I was like, let's just see what happens if I get surprised. From page 2, I was, oh my God, I am Chloe Brown.
Except the fibromyalgia and being Black.
Well, and I'm not Black. But like I have chronic pain.
Mm-hmm.
I have been medically gaslit. I have been medically gaslit by doctors, by people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with so many of similar or the same issues that she is going through. We have a similar sense of humor, especially when it comes to interacting with potential romantic partners. So I'm going to say I'm not a crier, generally speaking. About things happening in my life. Like if you show me a military homecoming video, I'm gonna lose my shit.
Oh, if there's a dog, I'm done for.
If there's a dog, like Defying Gravity and a couple other Broadway songs, like I will tear up. But like I'm not a crier, generally speaking, about things in my life. This book made me fucking cry when it was talking about her experience. And maybe it's just because like I'm going through some medical stuff right now, and I had an experience last week at the time of this recording that it put me into like a little bit of a funk for a couple of days because I felt like my medical concerns weren't being heard by people who were supposed to be helping me. So when I read this book and that was her experience, I was like, motherfucker. Like, it was so good. This book is beautiful. I need to read the rest of the series now, but like, thank you for bringing this book to my attention because Chloe Brown is a fucking boss.
She is.
And I want to be her friend.
And she is such an unlikely heroine. And that's the reason that I love Chloe, is that, she does have chronic illness. She is a plus-sized woman. She is a woman of color. She is not the person that you expect to lead off any series, but let alone a 3-part series that was what put Talia Hibbert on the map. So the logline for this book is that it's a witty, hilarious romantic comedy about a woman who's tired of being boring and recruits her mysterious, sexy neighbor to help her experience new things. And it is the start of the Brown sisters trilogy. So Chloe is the first sister, and then after that, so this book was published in 2019. Take a Hint, Danny Brown is about the middle sister that was published in 2020, and then Act Your Age, Eve Brown is 2021. And each of those, obviously, if they're sisters, they're all going to be Black women, plus size Black women. Danny also has some anxiety, and Eve is on the autism spectrum. So you get mental health representation across all of these characters. Now, this wasn't Talia Hibbert's first release. She started writing in 2017 as a self-published author, and she started writing with white women because she thought that was what was expected and the only thing that you would be able to read. And then she started writing more Black characters, but she thought she had to self-publish because she didn't think that anyone would want to read about Black women characters. So she really hit the zeitgeist in a very smart way that she had, entire series of self-published books in 2018 and 2019. She has a 4-book series called the Ravenswood series that came out 2018, 2019. And all of them have Black women characters. And she sort of established herself as being able to sell Black characters through her self-published efforts so that when she did go to query, she had that track record. And now, if you go Google Talia Hibbert, a lot of what she's talking about is representation in romance novels of not just, well, look, here's a Black character and here's an Asian character, but here's chronic illness represented and cared for. Talia's come out and said, like, Chloe Brown isn't me, but I do have fibromyalgia. This is a lived experience, and you
Yep.
feel it in this book. Whew.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because it kind of reminds me of when you interviewed Shanae Howard and we were talking, another Black author who had a Black character. She had a Korean male main character. I think he was Korean. He was
Yeah, he
Korean.
was
Yeah,
Korean. He was based on her
because
favorite.
he was based on BTS. Yeah,
Yes,
I think it was Namjoon. I think from BTS was
I
her
think so.
inspo
Yeah.
for that. And like, yeah, and Shanae even talked too about like visual representation. Yeah, visual in written form. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
full diversity, skin color. We have Black characters. We have East Asian characters. These things. But when you start bringing in invisible diversity,
Mhm.
that's going to include things like disability. It's going to include things like socioeconomic levels. It's going to include things like did you were you brought up in a household that had post-secondary education? Were
Mhm.
you brought up in a two-parent household? Were you brought up in a straight household? Like there's so many extra layers and Talia Hibbert wove all of these together so deftly that this felt like one of the most whole human representations I have seen of a disabled character, maybe ever.
Mhm.
And
Right?
it blew my fucking mind.
And it wasn't just like, her partner, Red, is not the perfect billionaire who's going to come save this Black woman, white savior thing. Like Red is socioeconomically less established than Chloe is. Chloe comes from wealth. Chloe has a safety net, Red doesn't. And so a lot of the tension between them is Red needing to work and feeling and having an ex-girlfriend who was rich, who was posh, and pushing that onto Chloe, even though it's not Chloe, because he has his own hangups about wealth and class. And so having these, not just diversity, like you're saying, of ethnicity, but also of class,
Mhm.
and having the white character be the lower class version of this, it was such an interesting and nuanced reflection.
Because that actually becomes part of their initial conflict because
Mm-hmm.
she's convinced he hates her. He's convinced that she's mean because one of the first things Red talks about Chloe is the way that she talks.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Chris. She's got that upper class accent. And I just love it because you always love it when a character, we talked about this a little bit in our enemies to lovers deep dive, is that oftentimes people have an enemies to lovers structure because they make assumptions or they've
Mm-hmm.
heard something through the grapevine, like a game of telephone. So they come in with like a preconceived notion of who someone is, and then they get to discover and unravel who that person actually is.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun narrative structure. You get that with this book, but there's
Yes.
added layers of all these different types of background experience and assumptions they're making. Like Red's ex-girlfriend, I think is fascinating. I would love to talk more about that aspect of their relationship. But I just very much appreciated how the characters were drawn from the very beginning and how things were uncovered or unraveled
Mm-hmm.
as the story went.
Right, because
Snaps for Talia. Snaps for Talia.
because it's dual POV, we know that Chloe is, working with chronic illness, that she's in
Mhm.
physical pain all the time, that some days are better than others. And we know that sometimes she gets snippy because she's tired or she's hurting, or,
Mhm.
she calls the super because something's wrong, or she bumps into him and she's not really up for a social context. And then Red sees her and she's got this more upper class accent and she's a little bit short with him and he reads it as she doesn't like me versus like, oh, she's hurting. And it takes him breaking down a lot of his internal barriers and honestly fucking going to therapy. I was
Mhm.
gonna
We
bring
love
that into the intro too.
therapy.
That was my alternative intro, was gonna be welcome to First Dates and Soulmates, where we think the third act conflict can usually be solved by therapy.
And really, this one was.
It was.
He went to therapy. Who knew?
Oh, turns out other people mess us up and we have preconceived notions about lots of things, and that's reality and that's being human. And I think also, when you don't have people who are meeting at the age of 18, but when they've had a life prior to each other, there are,
Mhm.
both of them were in very serious relationships before this and carried some of that baggage into this relationship, and that's
Yep.
real life.
Mhm. I would love to talk about the inciting incident of this
Yes.
book because, again, holy shit, this inciting incident
And her reaction to it,
and her
right?
reaction to it. It's just I got shivers reading this opening thing. So the opening incident to this is Chloe is out walking and
Just going for a stroll around the neighborhood.
just going for a stroll because she's having like a decent pain day. She's
Mhm.
like, I'm feeling okay. I need to go move while I can, essentially. And all of a sudden, a drunk driver cuts in front of her up on the sidewalk, and there is an accident. And she kind of gets a little bit like shell shocked. She's just kind of standing there to be like, that almost hit me. And as all of this, kerfuffle and hubbub is going on around her, and people are checking on the driver, and Chloe kind of just starts talking about like, oh, I wonder how much this is going to cost to repair. And I wonder where that lady got her haircut. It's a very nice haircut. But she's just kind of like frozen and panicking. And then she starts thinking about, if I had died, what would my obituary have said? There wouldn't have said anything because I am boring. And then that's the inciting incident. The whole like get a life, Chloe Brown is this idea. She had this idea of, I don't want my obituary to say, this is Chloe. She lived, she died. Thanks so much. Like she wants to have a life, but she's going through, being diagnosed with fibromyalgia and all these other chronic illnesses from the pneumonia that she had, and her fiance leaving her and having to go through all this medical bullshit. She finally decides to move out of her parents' house, and she comes up with this list of things that she wants to accomplish. And this idea of create like a list to better yourself is something that comes up a lot in stories like this, and even not stories like this. It comes up in teen movies a lot too, and we're going to dive into that in our next episode where we talk about self-improvement.
There's a reason that we're talking about this in January, because I think a lot of us have
Yeah.
this instinct of, what am I going to do this year that's different? This kind of
Mhm.
kickoff point of the year is why we're talking about it in
Mhm.
January. But it does
Ah,
come up a lot where it's like, let's make a list and let's talk about, what are the things that I want to accomplish? What are my big, hairy, audacious
yeah.
goals? What are the things that would make me feel interesting?
Yes, and I just loved that Chloe, like, how that scene was described, like, the little bit of, like, mental shell shock that you have when you witness what essentially was a near-death experience,
Hmm.
but it also, like, it passed by on the page so quickly, the actual incident, but then the ripples of it kept going, that I thought, felt so interesting and tension. This idea of, like, I have to make a list. And that's my first reaction too. I have to make a list. I have to make a list of how I'm going to fix this and not be a person whose obituary is like, here's Chloe, she lived, she died. What am I going to do? And then she has this moment with her that she's like, I make lists a lot, but I'm always having to start a new list for whatever reason. Maybe it's my pain means I can't do something. I had a list. I had a career. I had a fiance. Then my illness took that initial list away from me. So what is this new list? That it just like, it sets you up so quickly as to who Chloe is and what she wants, that I'm immediately on her side. I'm immediately
Yeah.
pulling for,
You,
I want Chloe
you
to have a great obituary.
You want Chloe to accomplish everything on this list, even though you
Yes.
read the list that she's written and you're like, oh my God, Chloe, no. No, baby. So Chloe's list is 6 things. Enjoy a drunken night out. And this builds the framework for the entire book. I love that it shows
Yeah.
up so soon in it, and then it builds the entire framework for the book. Enjoy a drunken night out. Ride a motorcycle. Go camping. Have meaningless but thoroughly enjoyable sex, which is
Very important distinction.
travel the world with nothing but hand luggage, and do something bad.
Mhm. That's the initial list. And I
And
really
it's a
like.
pretty solidly through the book. I don't think she changes the list until 60 or 70% too. Like this
Yeah,
is
because
her
she changes, I think, the sex one a little bit, and then she adds keep red at the end,
keep
which is really
red.
sweet, and I liked that a lot.
Mhm.
But I love this idea of a list because we all start lists. We all start New Year's resolutions. It's such like a universal concept of, I'm going to have a list of things that I want to accomplish, because if I can do that, I will finally feel like a whole human and a whole better human. And when you're talking about that through a lens of disability, the idea of wholeness, the idea of normalcy, I think is such a driving factor behind so many of your decisions, that to layer that with almost like a New Year's resolution type of deal of, I want to have a better obituary, I think is so moving. And it offers plenty of opportunities for things to go wrong.
Yeah, especially when the list is in Chloe's case, it's a lot of like, what are the things that I did before that I missed?
Mhm.
Right? So she wants to draw on that experience that she had before this illness took over so many of her
Mhm.
decisions. So starting with, the first one on there, which is not the first one that she checks off, is
Mhm.
enjoy a drunken night out. Um,
Mhm.
and then to fast forward, we get to the point of her enjoying a drunken night out, and she's at the bar, and she's like, "I didn't actually enjoy this. I enjoyed the
Mhm.
camaraderie. I didn't like the feeling of being drunk. I never wanted to dance, but the girls dragged me on the dance floor, and I went because those were my friends. I miss friends. Friends is what I miss."
Yes, and I loved that realization too, because again, when we're thinking about self-improvement, we think about bettering ourselves. What we usually think we want is not actually what we want, it's the result of what we
Yeah, the
want, right? So for
feeling.
her exactly, but, like, to write that down on a list isn't as easy as, "I'm gonna go get drunk," versus, "I want to cultivate friendships around me that I get to have fun with." That seems harder than, "I'm gonna go get drunk at a club," and then go, "Ooh, in the club, we all fam."
You
Don't
know, I mean, not to bring in too much marketing speak here, but I feel like I teach people how to do keyword research, right? And one of the things that I'm always telling them is like, what's the tangible thing that people think they want? And then once they establish what is the thing that they think they want, then we can get to what it is that they actually need, right? So often when people are searching, it's not like, how do I become self actualized? It's like, how do I run a 5K? And then once
Mhm,
you get somebody who searches like 5K plan, you can be like, and here's why you want, like, here might be some of those underlying feelings of why you think you want to start running. What does it mean to
mhm,
be a runner? You can start to
mhm.
explore that. But people aren't like, I want to become a runner because I want to be known as a person who finishes things, right? Like
Yes.
there's a level at which the thing that we write down is not the thing that we're actually trying to attain. And I think Talia Hibbert does an incredible job of saying what are, she says like ride a motorbike, but like there's a feeling of freedom and of
Mhm.
laughing in the face of your own fear.
Mm.
It's not really about the motorbike.
Yeah. Have you
It
been
does
on a motor
it does
have
help
you
that
been on
Red
a
happens to have one,
motorbike?
right? It does help that
Yeah.
Red just shows up with a motorbike. I mean, obviously they write it that way. I've never been on a motorcycle, no.
It's fucking terrifying. I've only been on it once. I was in South Africa because I used to work in South Africa, and we were at a friend's house, and he and his wife, they both had motorbikes, and they would go on like the tours, but so they would have Japanese sport bikes. And I was like, I've always wanted to be on one. He goes, "Well, do you want to go on one right now?" I was like, "Why the hell not? Sure." So like, I get the leathers on, I get the helmet, I get the gloves, and I sit on the back of, he had like a Yamaha or something like that, and Johan is driving and I'm holding on behind him. So, we're coming out of the subdivision and he's like, hold on tight, lean into the turns, do all this stuff. And I was like, cool, this is so badass. Here I am in like a leather motorcycle outfit in South Africa. Like, this is gonna be great. And then he kind of gets out of the subdivision. He starts going a little bit faster. And I was like, ooh, okay, this is a little scary. Okay. And then he gets on the fucking highway. Oh my God. The entire time I'm plastered to his back going, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. Oh my God. And then we get to the end of it and he goes, do you want to go around again or do you want me to get off at this exit and we'll go home? I'm like, get off the exit. So we go back and we get back to the house and the adrenaline is so high. I am literally shaking. And my parents ask, hey, how fast did you get it up to? And he's like, oh, like 120. And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, it seemed like so much faster than that. I later found out, oh no, he got it up to 160. He just didn't tell my parents that. And I was just like, never again. Never again am I going on a motorcycle. So like
I thought you were going to be like 50 kilometers and like you never
oh
went
no.
fast.
Oh no. So yeah, you were going 40 kilometers, like little like like granny on scooters outpacing us. Oh no, it was just fucking fast. Like
Oh
very
my God.
cool. Couldn't stop shaking for 2 hours from the adrenaline. So, I feel like that's one of those things. It's like good on paper. But then when you actually do it, you're like, I didn't need to do that.
And I think so often the scenes with the motorbikes and the motorcycles are like you're clinging to somebody that you're attracted to. So there's a certain level
Mhm,
of that too. And like you said, the adrenaline hits you and the arousal hits you. And
mhm.
like it's a really good scene to write. But I have no desire to
No,
be.
it's fucking
No.
terrifying. No, thank you. A couple years ago, I had, someone ask me, like, what was kind of like your kind of like bucket list type things? Like, because I think a friend of her daughter's had just been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And so she kind of was talking to our group, and it just, what would you do if you only had a couple months? and this is not that exact same scenario. This is not a terminal case in this story, but this idea of what would you do to like feel like you were living the life you actually wanted. And almost everybody in that room was like, I would travel, I would write a book. And like, that's fine. But what I like about Chloe's list and what I actually liked about my response to that, because my response was, I would just want to live to the maximum. And living in the maximum doesn't always just mean I'm going to go travel. So I'm like, I want to have family dinners. I want to take my nephew to school. Like, to live maximum is to live all parts of your life maximum, including the small things, because that's what you're actually going to remember and miss that you didn't do. So what I loved about Chloe's list was it was kind of normal stuff, which I think was her point, to go back to normalcy. But I sometimes think that's even more powerful than like, I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to write a book and I'm going to have a TV show.
Well, Travel the World was on hers, but
Yeah.
but there was a stipulation too of not needing to bring everything that you own. But I think you're right that like it was normal. It was and it was things that she used to do or that she'd always wanted to do and hadn't been able to for some reason that felt bigger because of her limitations. And she wanted to be brave past the limitations, which was really the important part. It wasn't checking off the list. It was doing things outside of her comfort zone.
I think especially too when you have a disability or you develop a disability like she did, because she had a quote unquote life before that. She had like was it like an incident of like pneumonia or something that she never quite recovered from that developed into all this? And trying to find normalcy, trying to find a way to navigate once you've been diagnosed with an illness or with a disability, I think is so stressful, because the rhetoric a lot of times for self-improvement, and if someone's not getting it, is, well, you just didn't want it enough.
Yes.
Like toxic fitness culture online. The reason you're fat is because you're not disciplined. The reason you don't have your career goals is you're not hustling enough. You can't say that to a person with a disability because it's not true. They can want everything. They can hustle but if they physically cannot do things, then it's not a limitation of them in a way. And I think
And it's energetically,
good.
right? It's not even like the physical limitations. It's like the spoons just aren't there for Chloe. And so she has to be very, very selective. She works for herself for a reason. Having this life where she does feel restrained and constrained and saying, no, I want it to be better. Like, how much do you cheer for a character like that? And I also want to say, like, this book, the writing, the prose is fucking gorgeous.
So good.
Whenever I read a Talia Hibbert book, I'm like, well, I'm going to quit writing because I can't do this. Right? It's just, it's these little, she catches these little moments between them that are just so gorgeous. Like, I just pulled a random one up where it's like her breath hitched like she might cry, which she absolutely would not do. Instead, she would take a deep breath and tell him calmly that they should forget about tonight because it was already messing with her head, that he should stop holding her like something precious, that he was absolutely wonderful. Honestly, he was, but that was exactly why he must never touch her again or call her button or even smile at her. His smile was very handsome enough to trick him into ill-advised feelings that could not end well. Better safe than sorry, right? Like all of this, it's just like these gorgeous metaphors, these like, I feel their pain so much. And not just the physical pain, the body aches, but the heart pain is so clearly and beautifully articulated.
Yeah, and I love how she's able to kind of describes Chloe's tendency to guard. Because like one of the excerpts I highlighted was, but if you're having second thoughts, please feel free to say so. Don't worry about my feelings. I have very few. We know she doesn't have
We know
feelings.
that's not true.
She has so many feelings. But when she says that to Red, like the way it sounds is like she's very self-assured. She's like, I'm not bothered. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about my feelings. But we know that's not actually true. And eventually Red comes to know that is also not true.
He sees through all of the defensive protections that she's put up, the fortress that she's built around herself, because she has been betrayed and left behind and abandoned and walked out on. And that's her biggest fear, is him walking out on her, him leaving her.
Ooh, I feel like this is a nice segue to talk about Red.
Yes. Wait, first I just want to read this passage because it is so freaking gorgeous. Okay. And it's so Chloe and Red. Her fingers fluttered at his jaw, like she wanted to touch him but wasn't sure how to do it right. He wanted to tell her that any way she touched him would be right, but he'd rather step on a rusty fucking nail than break this barely there kiss. Her lips brushed his again, and the sensation seared through him like a shooting star, the kind that streaked the sky for long moments after it passed. She tasted like minty toothpaste, sharp-tongued sarcasm, surprising hesitance.
Ooh.
That's the entire book, is him holding space for her to explore herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy Red.
Yes.
Just in general. One, he just sounds cool. He's a little long-haired artist, now he's a super at this apartment complex. Like, when you first read him, you kind of make some assumptions that he's nice, but he maybe not that deep, or he's kind of like a happy-go-lucky type of guy. And then the more you learn about him, you're like, oh no, he's just as emotionally fucked up as she is. In some ways, more, like, emotionally.
Because
Because
he
like
has
his
not
whole
gotten the therapy that she has.
he's not gone to therapy. But he's just like, he's so interesting in terms of how he approaches her and how he describes her, how he starts interacting with her, how he moves from this place of, she doesn't really like me and I don't really care to know much more about her because why would I, into, I'm intrigued by this strange woman I sometimes see in the hallway, to, oh, why did I have a sexy dream about her? And like her neck. That's weird. To, oh my God, I want to bang and marry this woman.
And I also love, I feel like they're so well matched with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Red needs to be needed in a lot of ways, and that's very important to him, and he didn't get that in a previous relationship. But he does have a parent with chronic illness. His mom's diabetic, and so he understands these energy shifts happening. But Red's reaction when things don't go his way is that he burns it all down and runs, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
saw that with what
Mm-hmm.
happened with his previous girlfriend in London, where they broke up and he just burned down his life and started over. And that's exactly, when Chloe, things don't go her way, she shuts down because she doesn't want to be left. And so to have
Mm-hmm.
this tension of Red running, Chloe staying,
Mm-hmm.
and Red, third act breakup, he walks out and he instantly regrets it. He doesn't even make it out of the
Mm-hmm.
hallway before he regrets it,
Yeah.
but he knows that he just, like, by stepping through a doorway, that was all it took. Because she's
Yeah.
so fragile in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, so emotionally fragile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really liked that moment when they had that thing when he was just like, I think was it when he found her list and kind of like almost like read it the wrong way, that he like stormed out and then immediately regretted it? Was it that time, or was it the,
It
because I think he kind of did it twice,
it
like not
was
just out, shutting down.
the first time that he stormed off and shut down was legitimate. They ran into her aunt and she said, "Well, who's this?" And she said, "No one."
Oh, she said no one. Yeah.
And that was a legitimate reason for him to storm out. And then the second time was when her sisters came over and
Oh,
they
and he
said,
overheard them talking about like almost like the bet slash the list, and you think it's like a she's all that moment. Like, I
yeah,
was a bet, I was a fucking bet. It's not that, but that's got that vibe. But like
yeah,
when he,
it
yeah,
was, they said, "I didn't think that you could pull off meaningless sex." And she said, "No, I put
yeah,
Red on the list." And he didn't have the context for it. And he was too emotionally, like, panic attack
yeah.
moment thinking about his ex-girlfriend that he could not hear her explanation and he left. And in his mind, that was a defense mechanism. Is like, he said he felt like the walls were closing in on him and he just needed to get
Mhm,
out. But Chloe said to him, like, "If you can leave this easily, don't come back." So it's those two core wounds just like
mhm.
pushing against each other after they've
Yeah,
so clearly fallen in love with each other. It so
yeah.
hurts. It hurts.
But I love that, like, he left and then went back to, like, the door, and she was just, like, in tears being like, "Nope," and he's also really upset, and they kind of have this conversation through the door. I like that that happened almost immediately because you could
Mhm.
feel that it was, like, a reaction, and as the reader, we understood why he had that reaction. I don't think Chloe fully understood yet why he reacted that way. But his whole thing, like the "I love you" under his breath, and she's like, "I don't think I was meant to hear that because I wouldn't have heard it unless, like, my ear was up to the door." It was just so, it was cute in a very sad
It was
way.
gorgeous. It was
So good.
gorgeous that they're like, they're laying in bed and this one thing happens and Red just loses. his rationality, which happens to us in these high stress situations. And he walks out in a meeting, and it's just like them whispering to each other through the door. It's just
Was so cute. One of the things I think Red does a good job of as a character is, and I think you made reference to it before, is allowing her to feel seen and heard. Because when she finally does share with him why she's doing these things, like her whole like near death experience, how she developed this chronic illness and everything she's struggling with and how it affects her on a day-to-day basis, she kind of starts censoring herself, as I feel like a lot of people do when they've been medically gaslit, is, you know, my fiance left me because he thought it was just in my head. And fibromyalgia, you know, is not often diagnosed because there's no test for it.
Yeah.
Right. There's not like somebody goes, oh, yes, your blood test shows you have fibro. Like, that's not a thing. And he says to her, whether something bad is coming from your body or your brain, it makes no difference. Still feels like shit, right? Still hurts, still need fixing. They shouldn't have dismissed you, even if it was in your head. When it comes down to it, everything we feel is in our heads.
Mic drop, Red.
I started crying because it's just, again, like, if you've gone through medical bullshit like this and you've been fighting for so long to have people understand that there is something wrong with you, that you do need help, and maybe there's no test that can show it, like to have someone say to you, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's psychosomatic. It does not matter if it's not real. To you, it is real. And you should be able to get help. Oh my God, I'm starting to tear up now because it's just like, oh my God, it makes like my heart hurt.
Yeah. And then there are moments where she doesn't want him to take care of her. Like, she wants to be independent because that's so important to her, and she's had to be independent. And there's this moment where he just says, like, you can't cook now and I can, so I'll cook this time. You know, like, it's not, he doesn't make a big deal out of it. There's this, oh man, he's like cooking in her kitchen. He's like, you want stir fry, right? Like, I'll just make you stir fry. And he opens a drawer. He's like, where are your spoons? And it's just a drawer of medication. And every other person who's ever seen this level of medication either shoots her a concerned look or is like, Chloe, shouldn't you be taking these? And like sort of hovers. And he just closes them and he's like, geez, where are your spoons? You know, like, he
I also love that it was spoons. He couldn't find.
Be spoons, right?
He had no spoons.
He had no spoons left in like the spoon theory way. And
I
talk
love
about
it.
Like a wooden spoon for making a stir fry for something that's simple because she hasn't eaten all day because she just didn't have the energy. She didn't have the spoons to eat the spoons. And it's just such a gorgeous way that he ingratiates herself into her life without pandering.
Yeah, because she has also said, or if not explicitly, it's been implicit, don't pity me.
Yep.
Don't hover. And again, I think that's what, you know, folks with various disabilities, or, you know, if you're neurodivergent, they, you know, don't treat them like you think they want to be treated. Ask them and listen to them when they tell you. So if, you know, someone is physically disabled, you know, you often hear this from like wheelchair users. They're like, oh, I was here, and then someone came up to me and just started pushing my chair because they thought they were being helpless. Like, no, you don't fucking touch my chair unless I ask you for help. If you see someone who is blind and walking with a cane, like, don't go up to them and grab their arm to help them cross the road. You ask, would you like assistance? And if they say no, you fucking listen to them. So I love that when he was, you know, wanting to make her this stir fry, and he just made it really easy. It wasn't a judgment call. It wasn't him jumping in and assuming what she wanted, what she needed, and how she wanted and needed it. It was giving her opportunities to say no and to tell him what she wanted. Oh my God. So even as he needed therapy because his communication was not good, in this type of communication, he was so good. He was so good.
Okay, I have to ask because I feel like you fell in love with Cade when I made you read Heartless. Where do Cade and Red? Because you're loving Red like a lot.
Yeah, I think I would probably still give the edge to Cade just because his personality was a little bit bigger, and I do like a little bit of a.
You like a little rough cowboy.
Yes, I do. But in terms of like emotional intelligence, Red is so good. It's so good. I appreciate everything, how he reacted and how he treated and how he even realized like, oh shit, yeah, I think I probably do need to go see a therapist. It wasn't somebody telling him you should be in therapy or why haven't you gone to therapy? It's him looking down and seeing a card for a therapist he already had and going, yeah, I probably need to do that. And he does.
It was his mom who gave him the card. But it wasn't at the third act breakup. It wasn't, oh my God, I lost Chloe and now I need therapy. It was,
Mhm.
I'm really struggling with my entire life. And
Mhm.
Chloe is a piece of that, but she does. And it's not like I need to go to therapy because Chloe deserves somebody who's been to therapy. It was like, I need to get my shit in order.
Mhm.
And what was it? It was when he had two business cards. One was for the art gallery and one was for the therapist. And he knew he needed to call one or both of them that day.
Mhm.
Right. And he sort of like gave himself the ultimatum of if I can't call the art gallery to get my business back online, then I have to call the therapist. It was so
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it so much. It's so good. Did you read the other 2 books in the series with her sisters?
I did.
Oh, what overall thoughts? Like, how do they fit in? Like, do Chloe and Red make an appearance in their books? Like,
They do.
what's the rest of the series
I
like?
mean, because you have a trilogy, so it sort of
Yeah.
is that domino effect to it. So
Mhm.
Danny's book, Danny is an academic. She works at a university, and she, God, it's been so many years. Something
Mhm.
happens, and she like trips and falls, and the security guard catches her and carries her out of the
Mhm.
university building, and they get pictured with him carrying her, and so they do a fake dating thing because he has a
Mhm.
nonprofit that he's trying to start for like kids in sports who have anxiety, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
And so they do a fake dating and then fall in love that way. And that
Mhm.
one's lovely because it's a Muslim hero.
Yeah, I remember. I think I read he's a Muslim security guard is what he's
Mhm.
doing, and she's like a bald Black woman, and then the last book she's got like pastel colored
Yeah.
dreads
So,
as well.
and
I just
yeah,
like the
and
look of the sisters.
yeah, they're all plus size black women in the family.
Mhm.
And then the third book is Eve, who's like sort of like the flighty one, right? Like she can't commit
Mhm.
to a job and something. I can't remember what her inciting incident is, but
Mhm.
she just gets in the car and drives, and she runs out of gas in front of a B&B. And so she starts working at the B&B in the breakfast zone, and it's very like grumpy sunshine because the B&B owner has bought it, and he's very structured and very organized, but he's not great at the communication with guests. And it turns out he's on the autism spectrum. And then as they learn about it, they're like, oh, Eve, you're on the autism spectrum too. But hers just manifests differently. So she's always got like a headphone in because she's humming along with things, and that helps her with her
Mhm.
stimming and her,
Yeah.
but like she's so warm and welcoming that it's these two characters who are both on the spectrum, and they find this balance between them in this B&B that's like, I'm thinking Wales. So she gets a
Mhm.
little bit of a break from being like the flighty little sister that everyone has to take
Yeah.
care of. But you see those threads of these two characters showing up here, where you see Eve coming over and chopping the vegetables and singing the Broadway musicals in Chloe's book, so that when you get to Eve's book, you're like, right, that actually she's been doing some of this hospitality and
Mhm.
retail and that
Yeah.
caretaking role of food. And then
Mhm.
they run the bed and breakfast together for that one. And I think at some point, oh, you know what? She hits him with her car. That's the inciting.
What is it with this family and, like, cars almost
Uh-huh.
hitting things? They're hitting things.
They're
Damn.
all terrible drivers. And I do remember, because it's been a couple of years since I read it, but I do remember there's one point where Red and Chloe are coming up on Red's motorbike to get Eve, and Eve is going the other direction, and they have this like passing each other strangers in the night moment, going back and forth between London and Wales, or
Oh,
wherever
that's
wherever
fine.
their town is in the UK and Wales. And it's just like it's they're just sweet, excellent books. They all have mental health rep. They all have women of color as the leads. Um, and they're all gorgeous, gorgeous prose.
Okay, I'm adding these to my TBR. Of course,
I
I'm gonna
am
have to
making you read straight romance this year, I guess.
I know. I will say, like, that and, that's one thing I'm really struggling with straight romance right now is just, like, the sex scenes. I think I got some weird body dysmorphia shit going on because it was beautifully written, their sex scenes, but sometimes some of, like, the descriptive prose, it really icks me out, and I'm having to do a little bit
Mhm.
of a self-reflection deep dive on, like, why do descriptions of, like, straight body parts, like, in sex weird me out. I don't know what it is, but I definitely had a couple moments where I definitely had to skip a couple pages in this book, and I've had to do that with a couple of the other straight romances we've read. That'd be like, "I don't know why I can't read this. What is it about this that is just making me gross? I don't know."
I don't know. I mean, I would say it's sensory, but there's always so much liquid in MMs that I don't know that it's really that so much as
I'm gonna have to go on, like, a little bit of a deep dive here, figure, why do we not like straight
you know
romance
what
anymore? What is it?
I if you want to go on here, okay, we'll talk about this in next week when we're talking about self-improvement, but like if you need to go on this journey of your own self-exploration, go for it. I am not going to force you to to reevaluate your
There will be
relationship
PowerPoint charts. There will be
with
PowerPoint.
I don't need a breakdown of your straight erotica scene reactions. I just don't.
Okay.
I love your friendship is very important to me. This is maybe beyond the pale of our co-host relationship.
Maybe I'll do a solo episode of like Nikki explores why she only reads queer romance now.
Well,
But
is it queer or is it male? You know,
that's true. It's only male. You're right.
Oh,
It's not even, like I call it queer because some of them are gay, some of them are pan, some of them Debbie, whatever. But yeah,
right. But if
maybe
you're not
she
doing
should have a
sapphic,
body
then I want to
part.
make sure that we're exploring this in a way that feels
Yeah.
safe to you.
This is going to be like the overarching theme in like our 2025 episodes of just like Nikki's doing weird deep dives into parts of her psyche that we're like trying to figure out why is it like this? Who knows? Welcome to everybody.
Nikki turns all romance that has a female character into closed door. Where you're just like skip. Okay,
Honestly,
and we're back.
Kind of doing that right now. I love that.
Okay, what was the thing that you shipped the most in Get a Life, Chloe Brown?
I think it was how they described Chloe living with this disability. So there's one paragraph I want to read because this is so my experience with living with chronic pain, with having a bunch of other chronic health conditions, is when she found herself trapped in that cycle, Chloe was supposed to do certain things. Things like socializing with all her non-existent friends, despite her inability to brush her teeth and change out of her pajamas. Things like forcing her battered body into excruciating Pilates positions because it was so good for the muscles. Things like meditation, presumably so that she could think more deeply about how much she resented her own nerve endings. These obviously were the suggestions of specialist consultants who were rather clever, but had never lived inside a body in constant crisis.
I actually thought of you when I read that.
Like, y'all, I have chronic health conditions. I am in pain almost all the time. And I've been told, walk more, eat better, sleep better. I'm like, I worked with I was working with a health coach, like a nutritionist last year because of some of the medications I'm on. It affects my ability and my hunger levels and all these things. And I know I'm not fueling myself, but they just kept saying, just eat more. Just go for walks. I'm like, you do not understand what it's like to live with a body that has chronic conditions. I don't get to control that shit ever. Even a mutual friend of ours, Lindsay Johnson, they and I were working on we were kind of doing some business planning a couple weeks ago. And they were asking me how many hours a week do you work? And I'm like, or how many hours a week do you want to work? I'm like, Lindsay, you don't understand. I don't get to choose that.
Yeah.
Some weeks I can do 60 hours a week and feel great. Other weeks, you're lucky if I can focus and be at a desk and feel like I have the physical and mental capacity to work for more than 10 hours in a week. I do not get to control these things. So for me, what I shipped so much about this book was that there was a character that was like, I don't get to control any of this shit in my life, and I still can have a life and I still deserve to have a life. I'm going to cry again. Oh my God. That's what I shipped the most was that whole attitude from these characters. Love so much. Meg, what did you ship the most as I get a Kleenex because I'm going to start crying again?
Okay, I can't decide, so I'm going to pick two things that I ship the most. The first is the cat that she steals, Smudge.
Also love that.
And I feel like it just brings her to life a little bit, that she goes out of her way. She rescues this cat that she should not be climbing into trees to do it, but she feels for the cat so much. And then they decide that Smudge is a boy because they just decide, and it turns out Smudge is a girl. And they're just so proper. Red says to her, how'd you know it was a boy? And it was like, well, Danny decided. That it's a boy. So that also brings me to this relationship with the sisters, which I feel like was clear without being this is the first in the sisters books, the sisters came, they talked through the list, then they disappeared for a while, then they came back when she disappeared for a couple days to go camping with Rhett, and then they just but they're always sort of being mentioned. There's this moment where Chloe's trying to talk herself out of falling in love with Red, and her grandma and both her sisters are just devils on her shoulder being like, listen to me, don't mumble, "Hi, Red, I want to ride you like a stallion." Like these
It was
little
so good.
lines that set the, and you can see the sisters dynamic that carries through the book, but then you have Red who's entering into it. It's just like I love their relationship so much, but we talked about it so much that I wanted to just say, like, the sisters are also really, and the grandma Gigi, who's like
I love
doing
all
all
of
this
them.
yoga, and she's like, she's like, I can't believe your dad was so boring. Like, she's making fun of her own kid because she loves the granddaughter so much more. Like, just that relationship of the Browns is
Yes.
so beautiful.
Loved it. Loved it. Excellent selection to
Thank you.
kick off 2025 and the month of January.
Okay,
About
so
self-improvement.
on our 2025 reading bingo card, this will hit us in the author of color or own voices writer, check mark, the color coded spreadsheet, check mark, the neurodivergent character, check mark, although technically she's not neurodivergent, her sisters
Her sisters are. Yeah, I
are.
wouldn't
So
count her in there. We're just starting off with a bang in terms of this bingo card. We're like, boom, 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 check.
all right,
I like it.
I think that's it. Maybe there's another one that I'm not thinking about, but we will mark it up and put it into our stories so you can follow along with how we're going to work our way through the bingo card over the course of this year. And if you don't want to miss anything, make sure to follow us on social media. We are on TikTok and Instagram and a little bit of YouTube, not as much YouTube lately. And if you want to come participate in the conversation, head on over to our Substack, and we have comments going for every single one of these episodes. If you have recommendations you want to share with us, if you had, a really beautiful reaction to this book or something that you loved most about it, please share that with us. We want to hear from you. So,
Love
Nikki,
it.
let's wrap things up here. What are you shipping this second week of January?
Oh my gosh. So for me, I like cozy video games. I think I've talked about some of the games I play before. So during COVID, I bought myself a Switch and I bought Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I put about 300 hours of gameplay into that game over like the last like 3 years. Oh my God, 4 years now. Holy smokes. Actually, no, I bought it at the end of like 2020. So it's been like, call it 3 years. But the game kind of got boring because I had like done everything. And then I was like, why do I feel beholden to a game that's just about collecting things and like decorating houses? Like, why don't I just delete the file? Because this particular game, you can't have multiple save files. You have to like delete it and start completely from scratch. And I kept thinking like, no, but then I lose all the super cool items I've spent 3 years collecting. I'm like, but who cares? So I deleted the entire game, lost everything, and I started from scratch. And I fucking love it. I think there is something so interesting. I did this with Duolingo earlier this year. Like I had like a huge streak, and then I realized I was only doing Duolingo like for a minute every day just to keep my streak. And I'm like, why am I letting a little owl tell me what to do? Like I'm too addicted to the gamification and like the dopamine here. I need to break this. So I let that Duolingo streak expire, and I deleted this game file. So I am letting go of my dopamine addiction. So yes, Meg, what are you shipping?
I am shipping Zurg, who is the villain from Toy Story.
Oh my God. Oh, the okay. I was like, what is this? Okay, Toy Story? Tell me why.
Okay, so we spent last month, we went for a week to Walt Disney World in Orlando. And so my younger son is a little bit obsessed with Toy Story, and Disney World does a great job of splitting the most popular characters between the parks. And I just love that even on the Buzz Lightyear ride in Magic Kingdom,
Yep.
Buzz Lightyear's barely there. It's all about Zurg. And I love
It's
like a really juicy villain. And we took my 7-year-old to Magic Kingdom. We took him to Hollywood Studios. We took him to Epcot. We took him to Universal, both the Universal parks in Orlando. We saw Harry Potter. I can talk about that in a different trip. But the one thing that stuck with him is, I want to shoot the Z's. This is the one who has a communication disorder. I want to fight the Z's. I want to fight Zurg. And when we're like, what did you do? He's like, I fought Zurg twice. I fought the spider. Just like the memorability, the stickiness of the memory of Zurg being the highlight of all of Disney World. Like, so many people are like, they go there for the princesses and they go there for the meals. No, my kid just wanted to fight Zurg, and that's all he's asking for. And I'm like, that is such a beautiful thing that they have so many options for everyone that you can just fight Zurg. We have a picture with the Zurg bots. We have a Zurg action figure. Like, my kids love villains, and I am here for it.
I love that. Also, that is one of my favorite rides at Disney.
It's so good.
Buzz Lightyear one. I'm really good at it, I just gotta say.
There's always one like Z panel in each of those rooms that gets you like 200,000 points with each hit. And it kept breaking down while we were on it. So multiple times, each of us got like 1,000,000 points, except for my younger son who got because you're just sitting there. You find the good one and you're like, oh, okay.
Let me just get this repeatedly. Okay, well, I love that. I'm so jealous. Disney at Christmas, honestly, is so fun. They go all out on the decor. All right, some good ships as again moving into 2025. The holiday seasons have now passed by the time this episode's come out. But you know what would make a really good belated holiday gift for us? It's you rating, reviewing, subscribing on Substack, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. Give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. We're on Instagram and TikTok at First Dates and Soulmates.
And coming up next week, it's January, we have all the language in marketing around us of like new year, new you. So we're going to talk about books that tap into that feeling of how we can become better people and how it works in a romance novel format. So we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.